The fact that INFJs are often perceived to be patient people is kind of interesting to me, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. Of course, this requires a nuanced exposition, and hopefully I will meet the task. So what, in the first place, can we say are the main ingredients for a patient temperament? So I think that two really come to mind as pretty paramount. Number one is probably the quality of not being overly extroverted. People who are extremely extroverted are going to be so easily stimulated by other things in the environment that they'll struggle to keep their attention focused, and that could be translated as a lack of patience it's a lack of intellectual patience, right? Because there's an intellectual component to patience, and that comes out mostly in extroversion. I want to emphasize high extroversion, because it's perfectly possible for a somewhat extroverted person to show patience, but it's very high extroversion. So obviously an INFJ is not going to meet this criterion since they're introverted. So that would seem to, meet the test for intellectual patience. But the other component is to be quite low in neuroticism. People who are high in neuroticism tend to be easily annoyed or irritated or bothered by stimuli. And one stimuli, persistent stimuli. And in fact, a lot of the same thing, like a long speech or a situation that lasts for a long time, is in itself a series of stimuli. People who are high in neuroticism, you'll notice that all the time, tend to get impatient quicker. They just have a lower tolerance for constraints, right, than other people. And therefore, patience being itself an ability to bear with a temporal constraint, well, someone who's high in neuroticism is just not going to be able to be patient at an emotional level. So if you like, that's not intellectual patience as such, but more emotional patience. And that's irrespective of whether you are introverted or extroverted, right? You can be a highly neurotic extrovert or a very much not neurotic extrovert. You can be a highly neurotic introvert. The difference is that if you're a highly neurotic extrovert, that will manifest immediately. People will notice that straight away. If you're a neurotic introvert, because you're an introvert and your energy goes inwards and you don't manifest as much, it's not going to be as obvious. It will be obvious enough for the trained eye, particularly if the level of neuroticism is high enough, but it won't be as obvious as in the case of someone who's highly extroverted. And that's what can mislead people sometimes, because INFJs definitely meet the test of intellectual patience, but they don't necessarily meet the test of emotional patience. Because if you just talk to INFJs, you'll notice that many of them will just be frank and say that they're not low in neuroticism. Now, some INFJs are certainly low in neuroticism, but that's not the majority of INFJs. I mean, at least I don't think it is. It all depends on how many INFJs, are adaptive submissive, how many of them are solipsistic, and how many of them are spiritual. I'm not talking about the spiritualized stage, because that's something that you achieve, and that does result in significantly lower levels of neuroticism and therefore automatically more patience. But the adaptive submissive INFJ and the solipsistic INFJ, by definition, are people who are developing particular adaptive strategies. Because in a weird way, solipsism is not adaptive with regards to other people, the social world, but it is adaptive with regard to continuing to live, right? And their solipsism is a response. Like it's an apparatus that they have set up to respond to their relatively high level of neuroticism. And that's just in the same way that symmetrically people who are adaptive submissive have grown this kind of defense mechanism to deal with their neuroticism. So Imagine that adaptive submissive plus solipsistic equal over 50% of the INFJ population. Now that might not be true, but on the internet anyway, it's like probably 80% or more. But like, if we take the entire population of INFJs in the world, it depends. If it's more than 50%, then the majority of INFJs are relatively high in neuroticism. If it's lower than that, then it's not the majority, but it's a significant minority. So it all depends then, you understand, on the particular kind of INFJ that you're dealing with. If they are adaptive submissive or solipsistic, they might give you the sense that they are patient, because really what they are manifesting is a form of intellectual patience. And that, in fact, is kind of a superficial impression if you're dealing with a solipsistic INFJ, because a solipsistic INFJ will be so concerned with making sure that whatever you're talking about, whatever you're bringing them, aligns with their love of their own NI world, that if they see like a disalignment, if they see a lack of convergence, they might not be rude to you, but they'll find ways to sort of not spend that much time with you again. So they'll find ways of not finding themselves in a position where they have to be patient towards you, because they'll be invisible anyway. That's a way of avoiding having to be impatient, you understand? So the adaptive submissive will be a little bit more permissive, of course, but they will be struggling to repress their lack of, their impatience. So really, in this case, we're dealing with types that are giving people the impression that they are patient because they have intellectual patience, or at least what looks like intellectual patience, and because INFJs are slow thinkers, not in the sense that they're not intelligent, but in the sense that they don't articulate quickly, and that applies even to adaptive submissive INFJs, by the way, who are still NI dominants, whether they like it or not. They ideate, they produce ideas that are not immediately translatable into the language of transparent reasoning, like verbal reasoning. There needs to be an extra step, moving from the symbol to the written sign and the written word, or the spoken word. That makes them a little bit slower and a bit more rambly, also due to the holism of the mental apparatus of the INFJ. So that can all contribute to giving the impression of patience, but it can be a misleading impression. And you'll realize that it was a misleading if you don't really get to see much of the INFJ after that. They might find avoidance strategies to not cross paths with you again, so that they don't have to show you that in fact they're not in a position to be that patient. So their unavailability is sometimes a sign that they're actually not patient, but they don't want to show that to you, so they find ways to not even have to face you. Now, in the case of spiritual INFJs and spiritualized INFJs, yes, in that case, intellectual patience is going to combine with low neuroticism, equal much more emotional patience, which is sometimes called in psychoanalysis and psychiatry emotional containment ability, the ability to contain the energy of the other. But so will, like the exact same profiles will be found in introverts that are not INFJ and that are low in neuroticism, as well as moderate extroverts that are low in neuroticism, and obviously not INFJ since they're extroverts. So you see, it's a complicated picture. You will find INFJs that fit the bill, but they might not in fact be the majority. Okay, so let me know in the comments what you think, guys. If you like the video, of course, please drop me a like. Don't forget, I've written 2 full books on INFJs that you might be interested to have a look at. The links are below if you want to get them. The Infinite Soul is called INFJ Life in the Modern World. It's about all these topics, but dealt with in much more depth. It's the deepest investigation of how INFJs operate in the world. If you have loved the book but haven't reviewed this book needs some more reviews, so I thank you in advance for helping me with referencing. I ultimately benefit from it. The prequel is called The Ecstatic Soul. The new look at the INFJ personality, particularly the mind of the INFJ, the consciousness of INFJ. What is it like to be an INFJ? This is the deepest investigation of this particular topic, so the link is also below. And as always, please keep in mind that my channel depends on your donations to keep going, and my Patreon page is available down below from $3.50 a month. You can really go a long way towards supporting me. I'd be immensely grateful for it. You get access to bonus content, including in-depth discussions of videos I share on the main YouTube channel, and also topics from my books. So check it out below, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye.